The famous builder from this old house, Tom Silva, talked about the worst workers he's ever had. Silva has been in charge of many home improvement jobs over the past 30 years and is known for his strict standards and careful attention to detail. But not every team member did what they thought they would do. In a recent conversation, he talked about the employees who let him down the most over the course of his 30-year career. Below is a video that shows the 5 workers that Tom Silva said were the worst he had ever worked with. Wait a minute, because the truth is about to come out, and you won't believe who made Silva's list. I'm Mike Holloway. Around the beginning of the 2000s, Mike Holloway joined Silva's group. From the start, Mike seemed like a good fit for the team, but Silva soon picked up on something about the way he was acting. He was loud and proud, made it seem like he knew everything. When you gave him an idea, he'd grin as if you were wasting his time. To be fair, Mike did have some skills. He was good at finishing woodwork, knew how to use a hammer, was good at measuring, and knew how to do standard framing work. But when it came to working with others, he really fell short. There's more to this old house than just a skilled worker. It's about working together and learning. However, Mike liked to do things his own way and wouldn't follow direction. Mike was in charge of remodeling the kitchen as part of a certain project. It seems easy, but Mike didn't follow the architect's plans. He made changes without Silva's permission. He changed the whole plan of how things were set up. He moved the sink, changed the way the counter was set up, and even took out a support beam that was supposed to be there. He challenged Mike when Tom Silva walked in and saw what he had done. Mike could only say that the original design wasn't working the way they had planned, so he fixed it. But this wasn't making things better. It was rude to the design, the crew, and the people who lived there. It took 3 extra days and a lot of money to undo the changes Mike made. It wasn't just that one time. On a different project in Newton, Mike and Richard Trethery got into a public argument in front of the whole production team. The plumbing and carpentry teams were trying to work together, but Mike wouldn't listen to Richard, who has been doing the job for decades. Instead, he gave Richard a long lesson on how pipes should be routed. Richard thought it was rude. Silva was very angry, and Kevin O'Connor had to step in to calm things down before they got physical. People began to be careful around each other, and the managers became concerned. It's only a matter of time before one guy makes the rest of the team unhappy, which will hurt the quality of the show. Tom Silva, Mike's experienced leader, tried to talk to him like a mentor more than once by pulling him away. Mike was firm, though. For him, there was nothing wrong with the way he behaved. The fight with the neighbors in West Roxbury was the last thing that sealed Mike's fate. The couple picked out a certain kind of used wood for the floors. The woman made this choice out of sentimentality. Her grandfather built an old barn out of that kind of wood. You'd think the team would choose what the boss wants, right? That's what everyone else did, but Mike didn't like how it looked. He didn't want to use the old wood, so he ordered new planks without telling Silva. When the homeowners came back to see how things were going, the wife was very upset when she saw what kind of wood was used for the floors. Tom Silva stood there and watched the whole thing. At that moment, he knew Mike couldn't stay with his crew. Like a true leader, Silva took the blame and said sorry to the homeowners. Behind closed doors, though, he had a tough talk with the directors. The choice to fire Mike was made behind closed doors, with no official statement. He got the job done, but wasn't asked to come back for another season. Mike might still think he was right the whole time, no matter where he is now. There is no room for ego in this old house, though. Only respect, skill, and teamwork are welcome. Mike had skills, but he was bad at his job, never followed directions, and didn't care about the people who worked for him. To this day, Tom Silva still says that Mike Holloway was one of the toughest people he has ever had to work with. David Cole. Next, Tom Silva says that Darren Cole is the 4th worst worker on this old house that he has ever had. Darren wasn't like Mike Holloway, the cocky builder we talked about earlier. No, Darren had the wrong problem. He didn't work hard enough. He didn't seem to care about anything, and care Tom could tell something wasn't right when he got to work. He always seemed to have an excuse ready, showed up late with tools, and left wires half installed. "I'm waiting for a package." The wrong size was sent. Wet weather makes this impossible today. Darren always had a reason for everything. The crew was used to getting things done quickly and fixing problems, but with Darren, everything moved very slowly. The safety of this old house is something that it never gives up. No matter if they are working on a 100-year-old house or a new one, the crew knows that every pipe and wire must be put in correctly. Which is why, when Darren Cole joined the group, Tom Silva's patience was finally worn thin. In one show, the group had to work on a project in Cambridge. It was their job to fix up a cute old colonial-style house that needed a whole new electricity system. Darren also changed the wiring in the bedrooms and bathroom upstairs. Everyone on the team had to work together to meet the tight deadline. They had to get in to do their job. There was a due date for the drywallers, and painters were already booked. Even though they were working on a tight schedule, Darren still showed up late 3 days in a row. When he finally got to work, he left the wires hanging from the ceiling without a junction box, a cap, or anything else. He was stopped by Tom Silva, who asked, "Is this how you leave a job site?" He shrugged and said, "I'll think about it later. It's okay for now, okay for now." The crew walked around those lines every day, which meant they could have caused a short or even a fire. Silva had to change how things were set up that day to make sure everything ran smoothly. That wasn't the only time Tom had to help out Darren. Richard Trethewey, the plumber on the show, had to wait 3 extra days because Darren wasn't done running lines through a shared wall. The production team had to work extra hours and pay fees to reschedule because of the delay, and everyone was upset. Darren didn't even say sorry. He instead blamed the way the house was set up. Silva had seen homes that were tougher though, with plaster walls, crooked beams, and attics that looked like mazes. He also knew that Darren wasn't upset about the house. It stopped being funny. The rest of the team was under a lot of stress because of his delays. He didn't try to get Darren fired after that. He was fired from the show at the end of the season. When it comes to homes, you can fix broken wiring and even bad building, but it's hard to fix someone who doesn't work hard. Ray Jensen. There's always someone on the team who talks too much. Ray Jensen didn't just talk though, he yelled, cursed, and argued all the time. Tom Silva says that Ray was not only hard to work with, but also brought bad energy to the show because of this. As work was being done quickly in Arlington, Ray was brought in. They were working on a Victorian house from the early 1990s. It had big bay windows and carved stairs. It was almost done, and Ray was brought in for the last step, the painting. He was hired by the makers through a third party. The painter's resume looked good, but no one knew how much trouble he would cause. The trouble began on his first day of work. Everybody knows they should make a good first impression, but Ray was 30 minutes late. At first, it wasn't a big deal, but he didn't say sorry for being late or get right to work. Instead, he hesitated, sat on the front porch, and started whining about the job. He said mean things like, "These walls are crooked. The person who put up the wallpaper did a bad job. This bad filler will cause paint to bubble." Tom Silva said hello to Ray and said they were glad to have him on board, and the project was almost done. Ray didn't say anything nice back though. He just looked up and said, "Yeah, well, you guys cut corners." Save money? Tom stopped dead in his tracks when he heard that. He had never met someone who was rude to the team in the first 5 minutes of arriving. Still, Tom kept his cool and chose to believe him. Before it got to be afternoon, Ray's voice could be heard in the halls. He yelled a lot, complained about everything, and even got into a fight with the other workers when he spilled paint. Someone yelled at him for moving his ladder at one point. Also, the ladder was in the middle of a hallway and in the way of people walking, so someone kindly moved it out of the way. Leo, the quiet electrician, tried to tell Ray that he only moved it to make room for a path, but Ray wouldn't listen. He went on a rant and said that everyone on the set was slowing him down. Tom had to tell him to calm down and take a 5-minute break. Ray wasn't done yet, though. He said that the crew just wanted to get things done quickly, not right. But Ray was really the one moving slowly. His lines were rough, and he never did the right prep work. Silva saw marks from a brush on the window frames and dried drips on the floors. He told Ray about it, and Ray lost it, and told Tom he had too high of hopes. The next morning, while they were shooting, Ray had another temper tantrum. This time it was aimed at a producer, and the recording stopped all of a sudden. The people on the crew were mad at him, and the landlords who came to visit that day were shocked. At that point, Tom Silva knew Ray had done something wrong. To stop the yelling, which was rude, annoying, and lowering mood, Tom made the call. They hired another painter, and that was the end of the story. A few weeks after being kicked off the team, wrote an angry blog post in which he called the This Old House team fake and rigid, and blamed them for not understanding real art. But it was clear what the real story was. Noise and ego were what Ray brought, instead of skill and teamwork. Because of this, Tom didn't think twice about calling him one of the rudest people he had ever met on the job. Carl Peterson. Carl Peterson is number 2 on Tom Silva's list. He was hired during a busy season when the show had to handle a lot of different job sites. Carl wasn't just a newbie trying to get known. He was a recognized contractor with years of experience working on homes. On screen, he was calm, and fans grew to like him. Effective as far, but WOM Silva found out the hard way that even the most beloved face can mess up badly and break everything. Carl joined the team to work on the project they had in Boston, which was to fix up an old brownstone. It wasn't easy to do the job. There were tight spaces, old wiring, and historic features that had to be kept, as well as strict schedules that couldn't be moved. But the team was sure they could do it because Carl was in charge of some of the inner structural work. At first, Tom didn't see anything fishy about Carl. He knew him to be steady, skilled, and reliable because they had worked together before on smaller jobs. Things went well for him in the first few weeks on the job. Carl was in charge of leveling the floor and strengthening the beams. In the end, the spot passed the inspections, and everyone seemed pleased. But something wasn't right behind the scenes. Carl had another job outside of the brownstone shoot going on at the same time, so he had to split his time between 2 difficult projects, and he didn't tell the directors or Silva about it. One of the worst things to ever happen on the show happened because of that one action. During the 3rd month of shooting, the crew found out what he was up to. Because the show was getting ready for a big demo scene, they had to take down a weak inner wall to make room in the kitchen. But first, the lower support beams had to be fully strengthened, and Carl said he would take care of it. To be safe, Tom Silva double-checked. It was planned that the laminated veneer lumber would be put in place, and Carl firmly said that it had been. But when Tom walked on the floor, it felt like it was soft. But trust gets you a long way. Tom thought it was all in his head, so he ignored it. The demo team started working upstairs the next day. As the team worked, cameras caught the whole thing. Then, after a few hours, they heard a sound that made everyone stop moving. The crew got chills when all of a sudden, the roof in the living room moved just an inch. Silva ran downstairs, and what he saw took his breath away. Carl said the main beam was safe, but it wasn't. The temporary jack posts didn't hold it down very well because there were no anchors, fixed posts, or bolts. The building was about to fall down completely. Tom quickly closed down the site, and the homeowners were told to leave. Not only was the building flawed, but a disaster was just waiting to happen. Right away, Tom called Carl and asked him why the beam wasn't locked down. Carl told the truth and said that he had a lot of work to do at that time. So he hired a friend to do the work while he worked on a makeover for a different client across town. Take that in. Carl put someone else in charge of a building job that he was fully trusted with without telling anyone. There were no checks, or follow-ups. That was careless, and something bad could have happened. The producers were very angry, and they had good reason to be. Not only was the house in danger, but they could have been sued or hurt if something happened, like the floor falling while someone was shooting. Tom was hurt because he had trusted Carl and backed him up. He felt bad about himself in front of the team and the neighbors. Silva stayed behind that night after everyone else had left. He looked at the unfinished beamwork as he walked around the site and asked himself how he could have missed the signs. But the truth is that it's easy to trust someone who has been in business for a long time and has a clean record. Carl was quickly taken off the show the next morning, and the footage that had him on it was changed. And what hurt the most was that it could have been avoided. The whole thing could have been avoided if he had just one honest talk with Silva, or one check. Later, a reporter asked Tom Silva to name the hardest moment of his career on this old house. He said it was putting his trust in someone who didn't care enough to follow the rules. Carl Peterson had everything he needed and a lot of knowledge, but he chose to do something that was dangerous for everyone. Greg Walters, that's something Tom Silva won't forgive. Greg Walters is at the top of Tom Silva's list of the worst workers he's ever had on this old house. Many fans didn't expect to see this name there. Greg was a qualified contractor with more than 10 years of experience when he joined the show in the middle of a big repair job in Connecticut. Someone in production told them about him. He looked like a good fit at first. He looked polished, confident, and like a real worker. Someone who could step in, lead a small group of people, and get work done that met the high standards of the show. But Tom Silva soon found out that Greg wasn't what he seemed to be. When it came to paper credentials, Greg had all the right ones. On his resume, he listed big projects he had worked on. There are awards from around the area and glowing recommendations from reliable businesses. He was also very clear and strong. He always knew the right thing to say in meetings. At first, no one thought anything was wrong with him, because he could charm a client and show a camera crew around a site like a pro. The first signs of trouble were not very big. His measures were a little off, and things that should have taken days took days and days to do. Greg always had a reason. He was either waiting for supplies to arrive or for the homeowner to give his okay. He also needed to double-check the specs. It didn't set off any alarms right away, but Silva started to pay more attention to him after hearing these reasons. As soon as there were a lot of delays, things got serious. As the group worked on a new addition, Greg told them that his team was done with the rough framing and ready for inspection. But when Tom went to check on the work site, he saw that the studs were not lined up right, the headers were loose, and the joist hangers were not put correctly. It wouldn't pass code or review at all. Greg brushed it off when Silva brought it up, saying that the crew was in a hurry and something must have been missed. Tom didn't agree with that, so he asked Greg to send him his licenses and inspection records. Greg said he had them, but he kept saying he forgot to bring them to work for a week. At that point, Tom was sure something wasn't right. He had to call the building department a few times, and what he learned will shock you. It turned out that some of Greg's permits were missing parts or hadn't been filed at all. Even worse, Greg lied to inspectors by saying that some parts of the work were finished and ready to be signed off on, even though those parts hadn't even started. The homeowners could have lost a lot of money by playing that risky game. If something had gone wrong with the structure, they wouldn't have been covered by the law. Tom was shocked at how careless and dishonest they were. He took Greg off the job site right away and called an emergency meeting of the show's producers. The whole plan had to be changed, and checks were moved to a later time. Someone from the outside was brought in to check everything Greg had touched. The show lost trust, which cost it time, money, and growth. The lie wasn't the only thing that hurt Tom the most. It went against everything the show stood for. People trust this old house to show them what real homemaking is like, even when it's messy, expensive, and takes a long time. So Greg's lying caused more than just a few mistakes. It threatened everything. the safety of the family and the crew's reputation, and the image of the show, Greg Walters was kicked off the show and told he can't work on any more projects. The problem was caught in time thanks to Silva's quick action, but it will have an effect for a long time. In a later conversation, Tom was asked if there was ever someone he felt bad about hiring, and he immediately brought up Greg Walters. Silva cares most about being honest. It's okay to mess up on the job site as long as you own up to it, fix it, and learn from it. But to save face, lies, fake permits, and putting a family's home at risk are the worst things that can happen. After what happened, Silva became even more involved in the process of hiring new team members. He looked over their qualifications, checked their early work, and made sure that something similar would never happen again. It hasn't since then. This event with Greg taught the team to be more careful in the future, and a warning that not everyone who shows up at work should be there. Greg broke the rules that he has spent his whole lifetime building, and Tom Silva is showing what he did. That's why Greg Walters is clearly Silva's worst employee, what Tom Silva left behind, and this old house. I love being a part of the show. I love being helpful. You hold two levels on this as you slide it all the way to the floor. Tom Silva isn't just another builder. Many people who watch This Old House know and trust him as the host of the famous home improvement show. Tom has been on the show since 1986 as the general builder and has seen a lot of changes. He has built homes, fixed up rundown houses, and fixed a problem that came up during a renovation. People liked him because he was trustworthy, honest, and always ready to teach. However, Silva's journey did not begin on TV. A well-known building company in Massachusetts that he and his family ran was called Silva Brothers Construction. Working with his dad and brother, Tom's first big job was putting in a basement shelter for a nuclear attack under their 1787 colonial home in Lexington, Massachusetts. In addition, they built the first set for the TV show The Victory Garden. In 1988, This Old House asked them to build a new version of an old house. This was their first big break on TV. Russell Marash, who made This Old House, found Silva and his team while they were doing major repairs to a Greek Revival-style house from 1985. Russell asked them to be the regular contractors for the This Old House show because their work was so good. As the saying goes, the rest is history. Since then, Tom has been on the show, and each year his part has gotten bigger. Tom Silva can also write well. He made important contributions to This Old House magazine and other publications from This Old House Ventures, while still working as a contractor and giving building advice to hundreds of home enthusiasts. He wrote a book called Homeowner's Manual: Advice on Maintaining Your Home, which came out in 2000. This Old House is an American media brand for home improvement that has TV shows, a magazine, and a website. At first, the show was mostly about doing things outside and in the yard. But for the two to work, there had to be some building work going on in the background. That's where Tom and his building company came in. Since Tommy joined the show, it has grown to cover a wider range of topics such as planting, trimming, potting, and getting rid of pests. This Old House, on the other hand, continues to educate and empower homeowners with unbeatable material on home improvement. People who watch This Old House think that what they see is easy. They see a group of professionals working together to fix issues and quickly change the look of homes. While not being filmed, things aren't always that easy. They are under a lot of stress. They have to stick to the tight schedule, and not every new team member can do that. Every episode of This Old House is structured in a way that makes sense. There are experienced carpenters working with younger trainees. Plumbers and electricians work together to make sure they don't mess up the wires and pipes that have already been installed. Then there are the producers, sound techs, and camera crews who have to fit into halls and basements that are already very crowded in order to get the best shot without blocking anyone. When building a house, renovations can take months. However, This Old House often works on a tight schedule. Homeowners have due dates, and the cams have to record every step of the work. It keeps track of all the cuts, changes, screws, and paint strokes. No time to redo a whole kitchen closet because someone messed up the measurements. When a million people are looking, you can't hide bad work. He is right in the middle of everything, not just as the main provider, but also as the person everyone looks up to. He works hard to be skilled, patient, and build trust with his crew and the people who watch at home. People have seen Silva's face tough tasks, deal with difficult team members, and stick to tight deadlines without lowering his standards. He got that name by being clear about what was expected of him and working hard without taking any breaks. Tom Silva doesn't expect perfection, but he does expect people to work hard. He thinks his team will be ready, focused, and eager to learn. He thinks that everyone on the team, from the master craftsman to the apprentice who works part-time, should do their best. He does more than just watch, though. He tells everyone what to do and sets the pace. He usually leaves last and is always the first one there. That kind of leadership always shows where people are weak and unable to do their job. But not every team member lived up to his hopes. Over the years, people on the team have joined the show hoping to be in the spotlight. Some people came in with big egos because they thought they knew more than the people who had been doing the job for decades, but thought being on TV would be easier than working on a normal job site. And some people just couldn't handle the pressure, which there indeed is. Tom had been watching how hard this crew worked for a long time. His attention was drawn to the team members who didn't do their part, missed deadlines, and argued instead of listening while acting like they knew things they didn't. Tom didn't often call people out in public, but he always saw when they did. It was shocking that he recently chose to name the worst workers he had. For years, Tom kept quiet about the problems going on behind the scenes so he could focus on his work. He is known for being reliable. What did change? People who were close to the production team say it wasn't because of personal grudges or problems with the people involved. It was about being honest. Silva thought it was time to show the whole picture after decades of helping people trust the process, to show that not every team member was up to par, even on a show like This Old House, which shows how skilled people are. Someone on the group almost caused an electrical short that would have burned down a house, which caused tensions that broke down team morale. In a different case, a technology error caused the roof to fall down. Would you choose the same thing Silva did? Were there others you were hoping to see? Which one shocked you the most? Share your thoughts below. For more stories from your favorite shows, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell button. Thanks for seeing it through to the end. See you in the next movie.